In this session we're going to make a Battenberg cake, so it's a sponge that's wrapped in marzipan. I'm also going to make a boiled buttercream and use jam. It's up to you which jam you use, apricot, strawberry, raspberry, whatever you like. It all depends on what flavours you want to put in it. If you want to put different flavours in your sponge you can. I'm just going to make the traditional one today. If you look at the recipe, it's all pretty much equal quantities, so equal butter, sugar, flour and the egg. I'm also going to make a boiled buttercream and creme au beurre as well to help to stick everything together. So I'm going to start. I've got my sugar and butter in here. In the recipe it says to add the vanilla when you add the food colouring. I'm just going to add it when I cream together the butter and sugar. So I'm going to cream this together, really aerate it so it's really light and fluffy, and that's holding in those air pockets to help the sponge rise. And then what I've got on here is I've got a bain-marie just on low heat. I've got my 4 eggs in here, and I'm going to whisk them up over the bain-marie until they're ribbon stage. What that's going to do, that heat is going to help aerate that egg better, warm it up so it makes it lighter, and the heat cooking it slightly is going to help stabilise the egg for when I add it to the butter and the cream. So I'm just going to start by beating together the butter and sugar, and I'm going to need to leave that probably between 5 and 10 minutes. So not until this is just together, not until it's stuck around the edges, but it's really pale and fluffy, it looks whipped. Now I'm going to start on the egg and I'll turn up the butter to full so it really aerates. So I've now aerated my egg. Aerated my egg and my butter is cream. So what I'm going to do now is just slowly add a little bit of this at a time just to bring it together. And of course, like everything, when you're mixing egg and butter, we're hoping that these are a similar temperature and a similar consistency so that they mix together. Just add a little bit more. Just make sure the sides are straight down. Make sure that it's all thoroughly mixed in. Don't want any lumps of butter in your batter. Making sure it's well mixed before adding my next lot. Try not to overwork it, it looks quite light and fluffy. Mix up the edges, make sure everything's combined. There's no lumps of butter. But now I've got my baking powder and my flour in here. Just going to sieve that in again, helping to get more air into the sponge. Now I'm going to fold flour into this egg butter mixture. Need to bring it together. Try not to overwork it. Overworking it can make this tough. We want this to be a soft sponge. And what I've got here, in a bowl ready, I've just got a little bit of the red food colouring, just ready to turn half of my batter pink. It's nearly there. What it is, this mixture is quite stiff. And what I'm going to do, just to make sure it's a little bit more even into the mixture, into my tin, I'm also going to pipe it into my tin. So I'm just going to get half of my batter now. Right. And just fold that food colouring in. Turn that pink. Like I say, up to you what food colourings you use, what flavourings you use. You could make a coffee, salt caramel, coffee hazelnut, you could do a pistachio rose, you could do a raspberry chocolate, you could do a cherry chocolate. It's completely up to you. So, I've now got my pink sponge mixed. I'm going to get those into the piping bag and then pipe them into the tin. So here I have my cake batters in the piping bag, and I'm now just going to pipe them into the tin. So once I've got it piped into the tin, I'm just going to smooth it off. Just use a crank spatula just to try and get it in those corners, flatten it out where you piped it. You can just lay it in, but it's going to be a lot messier. It's a lot easier if you just pipe it in. It all becomes a lot more even. One side. now I've smoothed and evened those off. Now they're going to go in the oven. It says in the recipe it says between 170 and 190 with the ration out. It's quite powerful. So 20-25 minutes. I'm going to put it in at 20, test it and see if it's cooked. So while I'm waiting for my sponge to bake, I'm going to make a boiled buttercream. So I've got 125 grams of sugar and 50 grams of water. I'm just going to put that on a low heat and just give that a little swizzle around, just a little stir, just to make sure that the sugar doesn't stick to the bottom of the pan and crystallise. So just one little stir before it gets too warm. It's fine to stir it. And I'll just have it on a low heat to let that dissolve. There's no lemon juice in this recipe, so it could be prone to crystallisation. So once it gets up to temperature, no agitation. And then I've got my jug of water with a pastry brush ready. So just going to let that come up to dissolve, start to simmer. Then I'm going to put it on the higher heat. I'm going to boil that to 117 degrees. Other things that I've got ready here, I've just got a little bit of vanilla essence and I've got my whole egg. So sugar's dissolved slowly. It's come up to a light simmer. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put that onto just a slightly higher heat, just to get that now going. My sponge is a few minutes off. I just want to get this finished off. So 117 is the magic number. It's about 106, 107 degrees at the moment. So I'm just going to have the egg starting to whisk up, just to be ready. So my sponge was done, same time as when my sugar syrup was ready, so I took my sugar syrup off the stove and I've just let it just stand for about a minute. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this sponge to cool for about 10 minutes. Yeah, 10 minutes, and then I'll cool it on the rack. So what I'm going to do now, I've just turned the speed down, and what I'm going to do is just slowly pour the syrup in with the whole egg. Now I've added all the syrup. Just going to increase the speed. What I want to do is make sure it is aerated, and what I want it to do is cool down enough that I can add the butter without melting and separating. And obviously the sugar, as it goes cold, will set. So by mixing it at the same time as it's cooling, it means that it stays silky rather than setting like a cloud. So my mixture is now lukewarm. So what I'm going to do is just start whisking in the butter. A little bit at a time, make sure it's incorporated, but it's lovely and soft, so it is a similar texture to the egg in the mixer. Obviously they have to be a similar temperature. If the butter's too cold, it will split. We need to warm it up over the bain-marie. If the mixture's too warm, when you add the butter, it will just split the butter and it will melt, and then it won't work. So I have to start again. Add in that last piece. Stop it for a second. I can see that a few bits are stuck here and there, and even that it may want to have it, a nice thick, loosey, aerated buttercream. That's all ready to go. So I'm now at that stage when I'm going to finish off the Battenberg. I've got the cakes cooled, I've got the marzipan, I've got my buttercream, I've got some I've got jam just warming, I've got icing sugar for helping to roll out my marzipan. So first of all, what I need to do is trim my Battenberg. Obviously take off those brown crusts. I've allowed this to cool for about 20 minutes. So what I'm going to do, just gently saw in action, cut off those sides. So now I've got all my elements ready. I've got my marzipan ready, rolling pin, I've got my sponge cut, I've got some jam, I've also got my buttercream ready to go. So all I'm doing is I'm just breaking down this jam a little bit, just warmed it through, just makes it easier to spread, stop you breaking up the Battenberg, breaking up the sponge because you've torn into it, or you've cut into it, sorry. It won't have that skin to protect it. So just along one piece, one side at a time. Just use a couple of tablespoons. What I'm going to do, just on one side of each piece. Like that, so that's ready to go. So, the way this is going to go, so I'm going to put that to there, so that sticks that together. That's going to go in there, so that sticks together. And then this one facing down. So they've all got jam touching one side of the Battenberg, holding them together as a cube. And at the moment it still looks a little bit messy. Obviously I'm not worrying about cutting the ends off yet until I've rolled it in the marzipan. So that's ready to go. So now I'm going to quickly roll out the marzipan. A little bit of icing sugar. If you wanted to, you could soften this. This is from the fridge, so it's hard, ready to roll. If you wanted to, you could let it soften. You could put food colouring through it. You want to do a chocolate one, put some cocoa through, or you can even on the recipe in your recipe book. You've got homemade marzipan, so you can have a go at that. It's quite easy to make. What I suggest though is just that you blend your almond first to make it a finer dough. And what's best if you're buying from home, because obviously lockdown, you're better off buying almond flour online. It works out cheaper as well than buying it from the supermarket. Okay, so just like pastry, roll from the centre out. I just want to try and keep it as square as possible. And obviously I want to measure and see that it's the right length and width. Got the ruler. it to join on all 4 sides. It's about 6 centimetres, so 6 times 4, obviously 24. Just to make sure it wraps all the way around. So we have it just slightly over that, and then we can just make sure it goes all the way around and it slightly overlaps. So there we have it. So, got my buttercream, and all I'm going to do is just use this as like a glue. Just to go on the outside. If you want, you can use buttercream going through the middle as well. It's completely up to you. Just going to put a thin layer of the buttercream on the outside just to make sure it all sticks together rather than jam. You can use jam and buttercream, completely up to you. So I would like to see you making the buttercream for one part of it, whether it's to stick this together or to stick the sponge together. So there we have it. So now what I'm going to do is get my sponge, lay it in. Roll it, move it over slightly, so then that's going to come down the other side. Just trying to keep the outside of the Battenberg clean and to get sticky. Just give them a quick wipe, some jam, stickiness and mess on the outside. Back over, make sure it's straight. Sorry. Make sure it's straight, like that. Lovely. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to get my pastry knife and just trim it, clean it, plate it up. So obviously, nice knife cut on either side, so I then get that nice clean edge, and then I'm going to put it onto the plate. So I've now trimmed, cleaned the ends up, put it onto a plate, and there's the Battenberg.